Talk with Your Mouthful is a unique interactive experience, bringing television, social media, and the community together, face-to-face, to eat and discuss important topics. For this show, it's the opioid crisis. Produced by Buffalo, New York's Bowling Entertainment with Trent Bowling and Rock Doyle in partnership with WBBZ-TV. Here's the concept. Veteran reality television host Andrew Dan Jumbo welcomes a prominent chef to prepare an elegant meal. Dinner is then served to a group of guests to enjoy while they discuss the topic at hand. When the program aired Sunday night at 6 p.m., during the dinner hour, the general public and people connected to the topic were invited to the restaurant to enjoy the very same meal. In this show, Mediterranean chicken and pasta at the Acropolis Opa. Then they engaged in conversation about the topic. The producers explain.
The reason I came up with the concept of the show is because every Sunday my family got together, and what we did is we talked about important topics, things that really affected our family. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to reverse what's going on with everybody not connecting together and getting involved too much in social media, but getting together at an actual event and having that dinner, having that connection with people, and then talking about this in a forum in the community.
Well, I think the guests we decided on were people that were directly affected by this opiate addiction, people that worked in the field service of opiate addiction, and they just had the knowledge that we were seeking to really provide an education for people out there. There was a mom, in particularly personally touched her. She lost her son to opiate addiction. It started as painkillers, and it just went into another whole stream of a down spiral for her son, and it's going to be very touching. I mean, this is what we want people to see, so they can feel what's really going on out there and not be afraid to talk about it.
Viewers could comment on social media and get the recipe and information about the topic at the show's website, talkwithyourmouthfultv.com. Interacting on television, online, and in person.
Welcome to Talk with a Mouthful. I'm Andrew Dan Jumbo, and our topic tonight is City Under Siege, understanding the opiate and heroin crisis. You'll meet some amazing guests for conversation at our dinner table with some life-saving information, and of course, some incredible food too. So let's go to the kitchen. Paul, it's great to see you again.
Great to see you too, Andrew.
This is Paul Souflatis. He's the owner of Acropolis Opa. It's on the Elmwood Avenue in the heart of Elmwood Village. Paul, what are you going to cook for us today?
Today we're doing a Mediterranean pasta. It's one of our signature dishes at Acropolis.
Is it easy to cook?
It's very easy to cook.
The ingredients look fantastic, so I'm going to go meet the guests, and we'll see you in a little bit.
All right, awesome. All right, so we have our ingredients for our Mediterranean pasta right here. Basic ingredients is the roasted red pepper, the Kalamata olives, artichokes, and baby spinach. One of the main vegetables that I like to season is artichokes. And what I do is I literally just put the polyspice, which is a combination of Greek oregano, black pepper, and garlic powder, right over the artichokes. And for the feta cheese that we already have diced up, I also do that as well. So we're gonna get started on the dish. The pasta has been cooked already. It is a penne pasta. And once it's cooked, it's about 9 minutes from boil. And what I do is I blanch it and then flash it with ice so it's cold. And it's a little bit more cooked than al dente. Now you turn the stove on. And the chicken is a staple at Acropolis. What we do with the chicken, and this is probably the most important part of the dish, is we marinate it. What you do is you put them in a bowl or container, and the ingredients are kind of the same. You have oregano, you have sea salt, you have pepper, garlic powder, And the other ingredient that we use for marinating chicken is lemon. Then you put it in the cooler for about a day if you can. Just make sure there's enough oil to cover the chicken, and then just let it marinate. Once you have it, you have some really great chicken. It's soft, it's tender. You can tell it's just ready to go. And you can smell it too. It's an amazing smell. Once you have a little bit of olive oil, the garlic, the oregano, the black pepper, it all comes together really well. So you let that set for probably about 3 minutes on each side, and then it'll be ready to go. We'll set that aside after, and then we'll start cooking the Mediterranean pasta. Okay, this is almost done. This is actually perfect. We're gonna take it off the stove. First thing you do, although these are very small, one of the things I like doing is I like cutting it smaller pieces, because if you're presenting it, it's just an awesome thing to like make sure they're like kind of like bite-sized pieces. So what I do is I just julienne it. So now that you have the chicken done, we're gonna start cooking the pasta. So the first thing with the Mediterranean pasta, make sure you put the stove on medium to high, depending on what your level of your stove is. And with the pasta, I usually put a little bit of extra virgin olive oil just to get it some oil and a little shininess. It cooks a lot better with it too. Your first ingredients are going to be a little olive oil. Make sure you have enough depending on how many people you're cooking for, but this is just for one entree. A little bit of minced garlic. And that is the basic part of starting a pasta dish. A little olive oil and minced garlic. So we're gonna start taking our ingredients, start putting them in. So that's it. This is the your basic ingredients for a med pasta right there. Let it saute there for a minute. Cooking on a big pan right now so you can see it a little easier. See how much olive oil I put in? And then I put about 2 cups, maybe 3 if you're hungry. And that's it. You just stir it around a little bit and just let it saute. The easiest part about this for any kind of, if you're at home and you want to make an easy dish, this is great because everything is already cooked. But with the Mediterranean dish, the Kalamata olives, the roasted red peppers, the artichokes, it really blends well together with this. One of the things that I do with this dish that it's not really needed, but the taste is right there when you do it, when you finish it, is I put a little bit of cooking wine or Greek wine. This is actually a Greek wine from Peloponnnesia area. I just put a very little bit. It has that sweet, crisp taste. And the reason I do it is just because it finishes really well with the dish. So once you're almost done with this, the last step in a Mediterranean pasta is spinach. The reason why is to add color mostly. And when you saute spinach, it tastes amazing with any kind of pasta dish. Spinach takes maybe about 30 seconds to a minute to actually cook, saute. It turns a dark green, really great. You can see the olive oil that's kind of like mixing in with it. Great color, fresh. And then I like to finish with one thing, the salt. Some people do it in the beginning. We like doing it at the end. And you're ready. You're ready to plate. This dish is amazing. Tastes great. Last couple steps is obviously the chicken that you just cooked. I like to put it right in the middle, showcase it. The finishing touches, it's basically a little bit of parsley, and I always put a lemon with every dish. All right, here's your Mediterranean pasta dish from Acropolis Opa. Opa! We'll be back with more Talk with Your Mouth Full.
This is Chef Paul Souklidis. He's the owner of Acropolis Opa on Elmwood. And as you can see, he is a master chef. Chef, what are we eating today?
You're eating a Mediterranean pasta. Oh, it's one of our signature dishes at Acropolis Opa.
It looks fantastic. It smells even better. So if you guys are ready, let's start eating.
All right, enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chef.
I don't know where to begin here. There's so much color on the plate. So while we eat and talk, why don't we just start off by actually just getting to know a little bit about each of you. You know, what got you involved with the, working with the opioid crisis, and just a bit about your background. So Frank, why don't you start?
I'm Frank Scarpinato. I'm with Erie County Department of Health. I'm a environmental compliance specialist. I run the drug collection take-back programs, help manage the drug collection boxes. I also do some of the Narcan training and some of the other opiate response programs that the county's working on, including the Opiate Task Force.
So you've been involved in this for?
I've been doing the drug collection events for 8 years. I've been with the health department for about a year now.
This crisis has grown to epidemic levels in the last few years, and obviously you've been witness to that as it's happened.
Yes, it's really become such a huge epidemic that it's all hands on deck, and everybody's working on it. They even brought me down from environmental planning to join the health department to assist.
And how about you, Charles?
Yeah, I'm Charles Sims. I'm a clinical associate professor at the School of Social Work at the University of Buffalo. And I teach primarily in addictions, and I've been teaching primarily in addictions since the late 90s. Before that, I was working on an inpatient addiction treatment program. So I've been around this for a while.
Yeah, seen a lot.
Yes, seen a lot of change in the last, 25 years or so.
Yeah. And not all for the good, for the better at the moment.
No, this in a lot of ways is a different kind of drug outbreak.
Yeah.
That we've not seen before.
Do you think the term, which is used a lot, epidemic, is really suitable? Does it help the?
I don't like terms like that personally, but I think it is so significant. I can see why people are using terms like epidemic or pandemic.
Yeah. Carl, how about yourself?
I'm a population health scientist at Buffalo State College. I work with the West Side Youth Development Coalition on the west side of Buffalo. We had done some work early on with alcohol and substance abuse agencies, so we were helping them get their numbers right. How do they know whether they're making a difference?
Yeah.
So we've expanded that. I'm also actually an epidemiologist, so I think I can call it an epidemic.
Yeah.
The numbers have really risen significantly, particularly in the last 5 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, you said you moved into this field. You started out in
I was an epidemiologist, but we worked through doing more quality assurance work for some of the substance abuse agencies and doing some health behavior sorts of work with the school, University of Buffalo, and their smoking cessation programs as well.
And you target specifically one region in Buffalo.
Yeah, right now we're targeting. We have lots of other programs going on, but we have the West Side Youth Development Coalition, which is looking at alcohol and substance use issues on the West Side. Which, when you really get down to what are the things that drive that, it can be things as simple as mental health issues, having the right kinds of environment for kids to grow up. So we're looking at different ways of approaching this as a prevention strategy.
Yeah. And Debbie, how about yourself? Tell us a little bit about your...
My name's Debbie Smith. I am the mother of Nathaniel Smith. My son's name means gift from God. and he is a gift from God. My son passed from this opiate epidemic on September 15, 2015, after he developed some difficulties with kidney stones, and consequently developed an addiction to prescription medication. He wasn't afforded the opportunity for medically assisted treatment, which we do have now, to help him to combat his difficulty, and he consequently lost his life. Based on that, I approached the Erie County Legislature along with several other people in order to ask them to help our community, because there were so many people who were passing from this dreadful disease. I didn't want to see another family suffer the way that my family is suffering, and I asked them to please help us.
Yeah.
And they did. It was shortly afterwards that Mark Polenkars put through the Opiate Epidemic Task Force, that he started it, and it evolved into where I'm the chair of the Family and Consumer Support and Advocacy section. Our section tries to fill in the gaps between medical treatment, treatment providers for substance use, law enforcement, and any areas that we see where there's difficulty, or where this epidemic might be misunderstood from a family's perspective.
So with his tragic loss, you've been able to turn that into a force for good and a positive contribution to other families that are dealing with similar circumstances.
I think my son was such a great child that every parent should have a child like him. He was very rewarding to raise him. And to think that there's other families that are going through this type of loss and suffering in silence, while we're not putting it out there and we're not saying we're losing something very important to us.
Yeah.
We need everyone to pay attention. It just compounds the problem.
Yeah.
So knowing what I have and what a great child I have was pivotal.
Yeah.
Also, I got permission from my other family members to be able to come out and speak about this freely, because, of course, with the stigma and with the lack of acceptance throughout society and the community, it was a difficult step to take, not just for myself, but also for my other son, Jeremiah, and my granddaughter, Nadia. I was concerned naturally that some of this would reflect negatively upon them, even though it is not their fault.
Yeah.
If someone becomes addicted to this medication, they didn't try to become addicted. It wasn't their intent. It just happened through the course of medication.
Well, I'm so glad you could be here, because you put a real face onto this epidemic that we've been witnessing. We hear it; it's in the news every day. So I'm glad that you have the strength to come and talk about this. I'm sure it's still not the easiest thing to speak about, but I know Nathaniel will be very proud of what you've done since he's passed. Just the activist that you've become now, and what you're doing. I want to throw something open to the table here. Actually, just how do we get to this point after the figures that were published for 2016, in terms of loss of life, people turning to painkillers, et cetera, et cetera. How do you think we arrived at this point?
Go ahead.
I think it's multifaceted. I don't think there's one way, but clearly what we've seen is, I've seen numbers that suggest that the United States uses about 80% of the world's painkillers, opiate-based painkillers.
Just in the United States?
Just in the United States. So we've got, we have a lot of people exposed, some of them for a long period of time, to these highly addictive drugs. They cause addiction. They cause dependence. If you take them long enough, you take enough of them long enough, often enough, you're going to develop a dependence. So we've seen that. I think we've also seen a willingness to prescribe. If we go back and look at some of the things that have come out around medicine, around being aware of and making sure that doctors address pain. For a long time, there was some concern that doctors weren't doing enough there. So there's a lot of pressure to address pain. So we saw the rise of these kinds of medications. So what happens? So people pull back, docs pull back. We've got surveillance programs, states have surveillance programs. So we're starting to see, I think we've started to see, or we've seen in recent years, this idea of saying to people who may have been getting medications for a long time, well, we're not going to give them to you any longer, or we want you to, or we're not going to give them, we're not going to give them to you any longer, or we're going to start withdrawing those medications. So people naturally, I need my medication, or I need that particular kind of medication. So some people began to move to other methods of procuring it. And ultimately, those who are in the field know that if you're using prescription opiate-based medications, that's very expensive. If they're not scripted and you're not getting paid for by insurance, that's very expensive on the street. So people, after they've kind of exhausted those possibilities, they move to less illegal ways of doing it, and then move from there to, unfortunately, to heroin or other kinds of preparations, because they're continuing to need access to that pain-killing medication.
So that's what harpens back to what you're saying about the inability for your son to be able to be put into a health program to help monitor, his use of painkillers for his kidney stones.
Yes.
So it's obviously, some of this seems like it would involve some legislation that needs to be addressed to sort of get out of the way of the medical profession doing what it needs to do to handle some of these areas within treatment that aren't available on a regular basis. I know what you do is to actually take back. You started an initiative to actually take back people who have prescription medicine in their cabinets. I'll give them a chance to sort of turn it in.
8 years ago, I started the first drug collection program, myself and 2 pharmacists here in Erie County. That day, 141 residents brought about 350 pounds of material to us. And we took it up to Covanta Energy, one of our longtime silent partners, who destroys this material for free. Now, on average, we destroy about a ton every 6 weeks. And that's coming through our collection boxes mostly.
And that's just what's being surrendered.
And that's all residential material. That's not material coming from doctors' offices or pharmacies. This is stuff that's coming out of our house. A ton, about every 6 weeks. And that's, we have a drop box in almost every community in Erie County. And Genesee, Wyoming County also have them. I know Niagara County has some too. And the residents are really using them. The more that becomes accepted, the better. And not waiting for collection events, the best thing you can do. If you have them in the house, take them down to that police station, throw it in the box. It's no questions asked. The material's all incinerated, so your information's safe. And we're 130 tons into destroyed materials already.
That's amazing. Those are mind-boggling numbers. I can't even envision what 130 tons looks like. It's extraordinary. So this obviously, and it's grown exponentially every year.
One of our great advantages here is we've had some pretty good buy-in, not only from the residents, but from law enforcement. They see the value in this. We have great cooperation with not only our local police department, but the sheriffs, and the DEA has been very helpful in accelerating our program. They believe in what we're doing, and they know it has a positive impact. Because if they're not in Grandma's medicine cabinet, little Susie can't say to Mom, "Oh, I'm going over to visit Grandma," and then tell Grandma, "Oh, I got to use the bathroom," and walking out with her Loratabs. And that's done a lot. On the reverse side of that, it has driven up the cost of pills in the illicit market. And because of that, heroin becomes a more viable option because it is so much cheaper. And that's how we've got into the heroin epidemic. A lot of it's from the pills.
And that's where we get into the whole issue of loss of life.
Yes.
Well, this is a fascinating conversation. We'll take a quick break, and we'll see you right after the break. Well, welcome back to Talk with Mouthful. Carl, I was about to ask you a question just about the areas of town within, you said you work on the west side. Is it more prevalent just specifically in Buffalo as far as opioid addiction?
It varies across the county, actually, but why we concentrated on the west side was there used to be a lot of violence, and there was a lot of heroin distribution that was centered around the west side. Some of that still is there. There's been some good enforcement efforts to remove some of the heroin, the gangs that were distributing that, but it's still sort of known as a distribution area. We still see people selling drugs around the west side, so the police enforcement is centered over there. But now we're starting to see people coming to the west side to get heroin and to get prescription drugs. So we're seeing people from all over the county come to that as a distribution point. And there's been evidence of that by seeing people with needles in their arms in neighborhoods that surround, and not just the poverty-stricken areas, but other neighborhoods, because people are coming from suburbs. They're purchasing the drugs within the city and then going to neighborhoods that reflect more of their background, shooting up and passing out. So it's, yes, it's driven all across the county. And we're seeing that in the numbers for deaths as well. We're seeing 60% of deaths were from outside of the city. And it's gone up considerably, like we said, over the last 5 years.
Would you say that the city is the conduit for the product? People tend to, perhaps the transactions occur downtown, maybe more so than?
I think the heroin distribution piece is centered. It can be centered in the city, but I think a lot of the prescription drug starting of that is still all around the suburbs. I think that it starts in sort of pill parties and people getting things from grandma's medicine cabinet.
Yeah, because of course the addiction starts with a prescription medication. Yeah. And then it becomes well, for some a recreational thing, and others just dependency because they have become addicted to it. So it sounds like the opioids that were administered as painkillers, obviously for correct use, are become, if mistreated, become a gateway to heroin and other drugs then.
Yes, very much. I think people and I think people's attitudes towards medications are that they're safe. If grandma can take them, there's something I can take. But I don't think they realize the addictive potential of it. Not everybody gets addicted, but many people do. Yeah. And I think it's that piece where you start to become, and it's not necessarily just chasing highs as well. A lot of times it's just being sort of feeling normal as you're going along. That's really the signs of addiction, is while you're dealing with this, you're taking it, but then over time you wake up in the morning and you're not feeling right. So you're doing it just to get on with your day. Yeah. And I think that's been what's driven this problem more across the suburbs.
So Deb, I mean, I think you were saying that it happened before you had any real sense of what he was dealing with in terms of his addiction to the pain medication, and he was gone. It's just something that moved very quickly. So advice for other parents that are dealing with, that suspect that their children may have something that needs to be addressed, what methods would you suggest that they?
Well, one of the things that I think that a lot of parents don't realize, and I think a lot of people who are actually taking the medication also don't realize when it pertains to prescription medication, is the development of the disease. I think from a family's point of view, from a parent's point of view, it appears as if it may be a phase, or it may be a bump in the road, or it may be a reaction to the medication, but we don't have a good sense that it's an addiction that has developed, and I think a lot of times they don't either. We did notice for how quickly it was that many of our loved ones have passed, not just my Nathaniel, our Nathaniel, but other families also noticed that this drug, the heroin fentanyl mix, is so lethal, so powerful, and so quick that we do not recommend using tough love or loving detachment, because by the time the person gets the message, they're gone. And it doesn't afford people the opportunity to repair the relationship. So sometimes when their loved one is gone, families are not just facing grief, they're also facing remorse to go with their grief, which gives a complicated grief, much more difficult to overcome.
I think it's really important to stress that yeah, because traditionally it was always tough love was considered to be the way to address something, but clearly not. You know, you need to move quickly, recognize the situation, and not hesitate to intervene.
Yes, we recommend that families get trained in Narcan, that they learn how to use the Narcan, which is a life-saving tool.
That's the drug that the sort of like the first responders will carry and stuff to.
Yes, sir.
It reverses the effects of whatever opioid that they're on, so they can get to hospital for treatment.
Right, temporarily until they can get to a hospital
Yeah.
for treatment. It's absolutely correct. We recommend also.
So what was this kit here that you had there? That's just like that contains the Narcan.
This contains the Narcan, which comes in glass vials.
Okay.
And is a syringe. It's inserted nasally for ease of use and less risk.
And it's something that's very easy for somebody that's coming to somebody's help. It's very easy for them to actually administer that.
Yes, very easy to learn how to use.
And but that's not available to the general public. How would somebody?
It is available
It
to
is?
the health department trains people in
So
proper use.
the health department offers free trainings, and we recommend not only people who have family members with addiction to get trained. We want everybody to get trained because when I do the trainings, I find that there's a parent, usually a family member out there who is taking religious notes, and it's because they just found out their family member had an addiction issue. At that point, that individual is playing catch up.
Yeah.
And trying to find out as much about this as possible. If you have that training and you come into a situation that you find out, oh, my family member has an addiction issue, my cousin, my niece, my nephew, then you're already prepared. You know some of the stuff you're looking for, and it makes it easier for you to identify it. It also helps break down the stigma because you realize these aren't drug addicts. This isn't some junkie you're dealing with. This is a family member. These are human beings. These are your neighbors. These are our loved ones. This is someone's mom or dad, brother, sister, or son or daughter. And you can't really understand how that impacts a family until you look at a little 3-year-old girl who's lost her mom. And learning after a family member is addicted is already too late. You're behind. We need to get ahead of this. So we recommend everyone in the public come out and get trained. Most pharmacies are beginning to carry Narcan. All insurances cover it, depending on what your copay is. Some of them are free. Some are not. There's a few varieties out there. The Erie County gives out units for free when we have it available. We prioritize individual families that have addiction in the household. Because we do have limited supplies, we try to get it in the hands where it will be most effective. But everybody come to the training to get trained. That's what we need.
I think when I got trained in Narcan, and it was interesting because when we came in, like 3 of us pulled our Narcan kits out and started showing each other. I look at this almost like CPR. We had that whole push many years ago about everybody should learn CPR because you never know when you might come across a situation when you can use it. I think Narcan's the same way. Yes, family members absolutely should, but you could be at a movie theater. You could see someone slumped over in a car in a parking lot. So if the person is not under the influence of the opiate, Narcan's not going to hurt them. So you're not at risk of hurting someone. So I think that's huge. That you can say that you might be able to save the life of someone that you might not even know because you happen to have gone to the training. And I think it takes, and to follow up on both of what you all were talking about when it comes to stigma, I'm trying, I've over the years have gotten to the point where I don't like the term addict. And that's a whole nother conversation. But I think people have in their mind, what is an addict? You know, who is this person? And you think you're right. These are people. These are somebody's son, someone's daughter, someone's parent, someone's brother or sister. They're people. So I really started pushing my students to start thinking about using people. So an addicted person or a person with an addiction, so that they really remember that we're dealing with individuals, we're dealing with people. And I think we've got to start breaking down those kind of stigmas. And I think I'm hoping moving language
Yeah.
will be part of that movement towards reducing stigma.
Yeah, easing the pressure that, so let's look at it from a political standpoint, easing the pressure of politicians to want to get involved with a subject matter like this, because, there's this connection to not wanting to,
Seem like you're soft on.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly.
But we've had another issue coming up with the Narcan and saves as well, because Narcan takes somebody from being affected to being what's akin to being in the basement. So they were working on a particular level of their brain chemistry, and the Narcan takes them down below what they're ever used to. So that's why you see people almost within the day following a Narcan save, they're back using right away, simply to try and feel normal again. So I think that, and we've seen that in people having numerous saves in the same parking lot, 2 or 3 saves in a day.
Wow.
And it's tough because I think people then think poorly to say, oh, they can't control themselves, but that's really the point. They're at the point where they can't control themselves.
Yeah.
Every use of Narcan is an opportunity for someone to recover. When people pass, they don't have that opportunity anymore. So we as families advocate to use the Narcan. We also advocate if you do have somebody that you love that is in active use, you pack the Narcan kit in their book bag along with their water bottle, so that if somebody comes upon them, they may have the opportunity to use it for them, or if they're with somebody who accidentally overdoses, then they can use it for them. It's a point of accepting that it's here.
So, obviously, this is, you can't turn on the news either locally or nationally without hearing about the crisis that the country is dealing with. Does it seem that it's more that some areas are dealing with it harder than others? I heard that a lot of rural communities are struggling with this. So I'm wondering more broadly if there's like a socio-economic influences here, or just beyond just it being sold on the street. Is there other factors here that are?
Yeah, well, we're seeing it in, as we said, we're seeing it in suburbs. We're seeing a lot of it in suburbs. We're seeing it in small rural communities where people are becoming addicted. They don't have opportunities as well. One of the other things that we've seen in the news recently is expanding methadone clinics and other clinics for treating addictions. And people are very wary about having people there. But we were talking before, you have a nice response to that.
Well, I don't know if it's so nice, but the truth is these are your neighbors, and everybody looks at a methadone clinic or any type of treatment clinic as the dregs of society are going to be brought into my neighborhood and it's going to bring crime. Unfortunately, that's thinking that's from when I used to wear corduroys and ride a banana seat bicycle with training wheels. That's not what this crisis is. This crisis is a middle-class, white male dominated issue.
Yeah.
And these guys have jobs. We see the use of Narcan through the day fluctuate, and it corresponds directly with, we see less use when people are eating dinner. But right before or after dinner, we see an increased calls and use of naloxone. And in the morning, when people get up, we see a surge, but when they're driving to work, we see a decrease during the day, and then right around breakfast, or right around the first break in the morning, again, we see a spike. But something we've also got to look at is naloxone saves lives. Last year, we saved hundreds of lives with naloxone here. Our death rates are bad. I'm not going to pull that punch, but they would be atrocious if we hadn't saved so many people. And we had something amazing. After 40 years of the drug war, we had law enforcement change the way they talk, think, and feel about persons with addiction. They respond, and they respond to save these lives. They don't look at them and say, oh, well, that's one less we have to worry about. They get the naloxone out, they use it, and they're using it before the first responders can get there, before EMS gets there.
Yeah.
And they're saving lives. And to get law enforcement to change the way they think and talk about drug addiction has been huge. And our politicians here locally think about it differently too. Erie County, to toot our own horn, we are way ahead of most places in this country.
Really?
We're not trying just one thing, we're trying everything. If it works, we're sticking with it. If it doesn't work, we're moving on to the next thing.
Is that partly due to the consequence of the fact things were a lot worse here, or just it's just community-wide, it's just more dynamic in that regard as far as trying different things?
Feel free to chime in, but I feel our leadership, be it our politicians, be it our Dr. Gail Bernstein, those have been such huge driving forces. And it's been a big, we don't have time to play politics with this because every one of us have residents in our community who are dying. And the response from them has been across the board, let's hold hands, let's charge into this fight, and let's win this.
Our county executive, Mark Polenkars, has been very receptive. He has appeared publicly in support of the events that we have done in order to promote stopping the silence, removing the stigma, and to get the public to accept that this is a disease and it's here.
Yeah.
And we have to deal with it. Also, members of the legislature have been very good about working with all facets of the task force in order to try to move our cause. So we're very lucky here.
Yeah. So if a family is dealing with a loved one that's struggling with any form of any form of addiction, really, what are their options? What is available for them? Where do they turn?
One of the things that we do have now is we have the hotline, the addictions hotline. It's 831-7007. It's a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week hotline for people to call in order to get information regarding this addiction, so that they can find out what tools are available so that their loved one or them can be served by the community.
And if they call, where for instance would you steer them?
Well, that depends upon where their disease is, and what we try to do is we encourage people to call so that we can meet their disease where it is.
Yeah.
If they need inpatient, if they need outpatient, if they need medically assisted treatment, we want to make sure that they get that. Also, if they need methadone or if they need any other tool that we could provide.
Yeah.
Even if it is harm reduction, Evergreen Health Services has clean needle exchange. They also have instruction booklets for correct ways to make sure that a person doesn't get an infection if they are actively using. And they do have collections also for used needles so that those aren't throughout the community. So that hotline, the 831-7007, is meant to provide people with information and tools that they need to handle this disease.
Yeah.
And I think changing the stigma, seeing that that law enforcement has had a change of heart and how they approach this, our communities really need to start to do that as well, because people who are addicted are all across the county, and they're people who work for you, they're building our houses, they're doing trades, they're in a lot of places within our neighborhoods, but it makes it much harder for them to seek treatment if they have to go to a place that's far away. It'd be much easier if they could receive their treatment closer to their homes, so they could continue to be productive.
Yeah.
And not be taken out of that community.
You want to look at treatment, I think. When I think about treatment, treatment's a continuum, right? They're starting from detoxification all the way up to, and we could even include on the other side of that, medication-assisted treatment. So some people are going to be able to, who become addicted, they're going to be able to really overcome that addiction with psychosocial treatment. An outpatient clinic, they're going to be able to go to outpatient clinic and they'll do okay. They'll somehow or another they'll manage that. Then you'll have another group of individuals who are going to need, at least in the short term, some medication-assisted treatment. They're going to need something like methadone or something like Suboxone or something, or one of those kinds of medications in addition to the psychosocial treatment. The medication will help stabilize their life and stabilize the effects of their addiction, while the psychosocial treatment kicks in.
Yep.
And then you're going to have a group of people who are, quite frankly, they're going to need medication-assisted therapy for a long, long time, maybe for their whole life. But we have to recognize that, like any other disease process, that there's going to be people are going to fall into different parts of that, and not to get discouraged because you're your significant other or your family member or your friend falls into, I'm going to lead, I may need this medication for the rest of my life, and recognize that may happen, and that's okay. We know it will stabilize their life and their life situation, as opposed to looking and saying, why can't you be like so-and-so who went to outpatient treatment for 6 months and now they seem to be drug-free and on the way to recovery. So we have to understand, we have to, again, begin to understand that continuum of care that an individual will receive in the community.
It's interesting that, well, Buffalo obviously being a city that has a great medical history, with its, well, they refer to it as the medical corridor. It seems like it's a good city to try to have the infrastructure to implement lots of different approaches to see what will then work and can be applied across the country. Interesting, you said that the police departments have come around as well to understanding this is not, not to try and arrest, but to help, to save life and then deal with, but they also then are challenged with the difficulty of dealing with the heroin availability on the street, which is obviously what, as you're saying, is being cut with fentanyl, which is what's doing the most damage. I'm wondering what has been done in the police departments locally to actually handle that side of the equation.
So, law enforcement here has, many of our law enforcement have undertaken a project, we call it REAP. And the whole purpose of the REAP program is if you have a drug addiction problem and you want help, you can walk into any one of these police stations and say, I have a problem and I want help. And law enforcement is going to come up, they're going to search you, they're going to take any drugs you have, they're going to take any paraphernalia you have, and then they're going to call somebody who's going to come and sit down with you. And as you work through the process, and this isn't a cold handoff where, okay, here's the phone numbers, feel free to give them a call. This is, we have individuals who will pick up the phone and call, and you will get rapidly assessed and you will get appropriately placed. So if the doctors say that outpatient's going to be better for you, and for many people outpatient is better because they learn to live with all the triggers of having this availability, of having these friends that they're going to see on the street every day. Learning to live with those triggers nearby can be extremely successful. Where a lot of times we see people who wind up in inpatient go and they're like, okay, as soon as they get out, they run into their old buddy who's like, hey, want to go get high? And they're like, okay. And so REAP is great because you show up at the police station, you're not getting arrested. You are getting help. And once you're into treatment, that angel that has sat there beside you all day and made sure you have somebody to talk to, someone who sits there, you're not alone in the process. And we actually had one situation where an individual went into one of the police stations, asked for help, and before the angel could get out of her house and over to the police station, they were already in treatment. We're turning people around that quick. And all of our communities, and the police are involved, the treatment providers are involved. We have so much buy-in, and unfortunately the program is not being used as heavily as we'd like. And some of it's still fear. I'm a drug addict, and I know if I walk into a police station, they're the bad guys. They're out to arrest me. So overcoming that is part of the problem. But REAP works, and we've had good success with it.
And it strikes when the addict is ready to do something about it, which I think is a very important part. Is that, we talked about tough love and how it's a difficult situation to deal with, but somebody has to be ready to want to treat themselves before they take action. And
I think that's where the family really has to step in, is we have to prepare our loved ones. We have to start using the terms that go along with, that help to remove the denial, to go along with accepting the fact that they have a disease. So a lot of times families think that they need to sit back and wait. They don't have to sit back and wait. They can take an active role in assisting their loved one with getting the type of treatment that they need, just by helping to remove the stigma of addiction and to help remove the denial from that equation.
Families have to also understand, until the individual is ready to get help, he's not going to get help, and it's not going to be successful. We can't roll up 18 style, grab them off the street and drag them off to rehab. We can't do that. They have to want it.
Let's talk a bit about how this, this epidemic got started. It was the increased availability of painkillers, which obviously get into the system by doctors prescribing them. I'm assuming at the very start that the pharmaceutical industry probably presented them with a new line of drugs that they were told were going to be something that would replace prior painkillers, and the doctors weren't told that these things were highly addictive.
That's correct.
You know, are they still being prescribed at the same rate? You know, are doctors going through the same training to sort of like maybe prescribe other things or monitor them more carefully?
My office, Dr. Gail Bernstein, our medical commissioner, she has been so active in the medical community. We've done a whole bunch of trainings on buprenorphine and Suboxone so doctors can prescribe these medically assisted treatments. She's been very active with working with the doctors to change prescribing habits. Mm-hmm. Purdue Pharmaceuticals, the maker of oxycodone, or oxycontins, back when this crisis began, was literally telling them that these pills have very low risk for addiction.
Yep.
And at the same time, they were also funding studies saying that pain management is the fifth indicator, the fifth vital sign. And you guys aren't treating pain properly. So we had a drug company telling doctors you're not doing your job right, and then training doctors how to do the job right, and doing the job right was prescribing our drugs.
Yeah, for a profit margin, of course.
They were very
quite a
aggressive in their
problem.
marketing strategies.
Yeah. I did read that one of them who should remain nameless actually was fined, I think, like almost $250 million, I believe, for false advertising, making false claims. So interesting that finally, well, what the clock has turned, and now they're being forced to readdress this situation. So you have a similar experience? You think the doctors are?
I think there is some changes in medical schools. There are New York State's requiring doctors to get a certain level of training around the prescription of opiate-based medications. I think some medical schools are starting to address that more specifically. I'm not sure what they were getting, what kind of training they were getting before, but as I understand, it was not adequate. So, you know, with the people coming out of medical school. So I think we're beginning to make that change on the doctor end. But we've still got this whole cohort of people who have been exposed to these types of drugs, who are being managed on them for everything from chronic pain to long-term use for probably what was acute pain, but the person keeps coming back and says, I'm in pain. Mm-hmm. So we still have this large cohort of people out there that we have to address.
Yeah.
And we're moving forward, I think, on the training end, but we're behind the 8 ball as far as who's currently in the community. And how much of this medication is still floating around out there that doesn't make it to the drop box, or somebody hangs on to it because the doctors have kind of tightened up a little bit. So, you know, I got a couple pills left over, and I think it's going to be safe for me to keep them in case I accidentally need one. And that opens the door for someone to misuse it.
Yeah.
Someone to get into the supply, take it, misuse it, and you may not know it for months because you're not counting your pills, you're not checking that.
Yeah.
And that pill has already been diverted into a different situation.
Yeah. We'll take a quick break here, so we're going to come right back with Talk with a Mouthful for some final thoughts and, of course, dessert. I'm looking forward to that. We'll be right back. No Greek meal is complete without rice pudding with what looks like cinnamon on top. Delicious. Paul, thank you very much. Outstanding. Well, I want to thank you all guys just so much for taking part in this episode of Talk with a Mouthful. We covered so much ground on what is a very difficult subject, but I feel like I've learned a lot. I feel very enlightened now about opioid addiction. I want to ask you if you guys have any last words on this subject.
I want people to get educated and get trained in naloxone. Even if you don't think you need it, get trained, because you never know when or where you're going to need it.
How about you, Chris?
Treatment works. All kinds of treatment. It works.
Help reduce stigma. We have a lot of thoughts about what people who are addicted are, try and reduce that.
Please love them, treat them with kindness and compassion, courtesy, because you never know if that might be the last time that you see your loved one alive.
Yeah, yep. Well, I'm sure, Nathaniel, we're very pleased that you actually came and joined us today, because your story is one that I think everybody needed to hear. So I'm sure he's very proud of you, and thank you for taking part of this amazing dinner today. I'm Andrew Dan Jumbo. This is Talk with a Mouthful, and make sure you go to our website, talkwithamouthfultv.com, for all the information you need about the things we discussed here today. Thank you for watching.